How are you? So welcome once again to an episode of New Horizons in Engaged Buddhism. My name is Julia Sagebien, and this is the last presentation that we're going to have for season one. We're still working on the possibility of season two, but we're not necessarily clear. And I am absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to interview someone whose experience of a lot of what we've talked about is a form of, what would you call it? Radical intimacy or something was the word that he used, radical
I think
intimacy.
we talked dangerous
Oh,
intimacy.
dangerous,
Ooh.
dangerous. In the sense that, we all talk about everything that we might do for other people and so on and so forth, but at what distance? At what distance? And one of the reasons that I think this is very much a befitting way to end season one is because our guest today, Joshin Byrnes, really has brought in to his life. He lives the world of service. And he has a great sense of humor, so he doesn't get too full of himself, which, as we all know, is extraordinarily important. Joshin is a Zen priest, and he is the teacher at Bread Loaf Mountain Center, Zen community in Middlebury, Vermont. And he works as part of a hub of community at Bread Loaf Mountain, where what they think about is no barriers. They have a temple that has no barriers, where the measure of a community, it's its capacity to care. And I was very impressed by the definition of the mission of Bread Love Mountain. Our mission is to transform suffering into wisdom. That's what we're all trying to do. And compassion by bringing people together from different life experiences to develop understanding and belonging, including those who feel marginalized, alienated, or isolated due to economic status, age, ability, health, or identity. This is how we realize the oneness of life. Perhaps we have thought of engaged Buddhism as having to do with the needs of other people. However, more and more, it's becoming our own very need, our need for community, a need for trust, a need for a place to cry, a need for a place to laugh, and a need for a place to feel we're cared for, and we have the agency to care for somebody else. So I am going to introduce you to Joshin, and we're going to talk a little bit about his past. But what I really asked him to do was that to pretend he was writing a screenplay where he had to describe all the people that he works with, whether they're working as volunteers, as Zen priests, as anything, or people who actually are, I don't know what you call them, you wouldn't call them clients, but community members, I imagine, in your various communities, and also in the street retreats that he actually conducts. Well, that being said, Joshin, welcome.
Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. I'm so glad you've been doing this project. It's been wonderful to listen to your interviews. Really great. And I love your sense of humor as well.
It is
We,
helpful,
we've
isn't it?
already laughed a lot, which is
I
fantastic.
know. We just get to know each other and we know, oh yeah, we'll have to play. We'll have to play. That being said, can you tell us a little bit about your past, about how you came from being whomever you were in the environment that you grew up in right before you become a Zen practitioner? Tell us a little bit about where you came from.
Right before, like the night before?
Yeah. Yeah, what were you doing? I saw you.
Yeah. No, well, life is funny, you know. I grew up in Brooklyn, very poor, working class, Catholic, Italian, Irish family, um, and figured out pretty early on I was a gay kid and always felt like a little bit of an outsider from the society that I lived in. But those Brooklyn years were actually really formative years for me in many ways, not only spiritually, because I think I found some kind of refuge in Catholicism, oddly enough. but also because I learned a lot about community and family living in this ethnic Brooklyn working class community. Like we had each other's backs. That was the experience. We just had each other's backs. And that stayed with me. Later on, part of it was trying to figure out, this was the 1980s now, late 70s and 80s, trying to figure out what it meant to be gay and in the society that we lived in then. And being Catholic, I had the very helpful out of joining the monastery as an option. So I went to a Benedictine monastery for 2 years when I was 19 to 21, and there got introduced to contemplative practice, which I really, really valued and appreciated. Studied philosophy. I was kind of escaping Brooklyn in many ways. And then I joined a religious order called the Dominicans and took vows with them until 1986, I believe, when I was about 26 years old. I met my partner there, actually, in the Dominicans. We're still together 44 years later. So it gave me many gifts. But one of the things I did in the Dominicans a lot was, the Catholics, there are branches of Catholicism that are very focused on the social teachings of Jesus and social justice. And I really cut my teeth on social justice with them. Different kinds of activism, service projects, working in marginalized communities. And I really loved that work while I studied theology and trained to be a priest. But then I had a big aha moment in a theology class where I realized I couldn't represent the theology. I didn't believe it in my heart, even though I could preach it, which was a little scary moment, actually, of realizing I could say something in a convincing way that I actually didn't believe inside myself. And that was a little moment of truth for me where I thought, this is dangerous. I can't live this kind of a lie. So I bailed out, and my partner Bernie and I left. I became then a very devout atheist for a long time. And I went to graduate school for a while and then started, this was in now the late 80s, I became an ACT UP activist in New York, where I was in graduate school, and then eventually transitioned into AIDS work, where I did that for 15 years on both coasts. And then in about, I can't remember what year, maybe 2000, I switched out of AIDS work into community philanthropy, where I worked with nonprofits and donors to make magic happen in communities. Through that, I maintained my atheism, but I then hit a classic midlife crisis moment, loss of meaning in my life, feeling really pretty burned out, crispy, fragile, brittle. My relationship got in trouble through my partner and I had adopted 3 children from the foster care system, and they all had early trauma and a range of disabilities. And I was just way overextended. This altruism that I had just went pathological. And it was a kind of pathological altruism, like, I'm going to save the world. And of course, you can't save the whole world. Right. So, so anyway, I went to a therapist and he was like, I think you need to reclaim your contemplative life. I think you lost something when you left Catholicism. And so that sent me on a bit of a journey through yogic practice. I looked east because I thought I had burned the bridge to the west. So I turned east, and there I eventually discovered, at 5 o'clock in the morning before the kids got up, mindfulness practice, Vipassana practice, reading a lot of books, starting my day with a regular practice. And eventually I found my way to Zen through actually hearing about Bernie Glassman's work. So maybe I can just pause there for a minute and just kind of say something about that moment of encounter. So I was the CEO of the Vermont Community Foundation, which is a statewide community foundation that puts organizations together. And it was like my first week on the job. And the chair the head of the Ben and Jerry's Foundation came to meet me. And that was a gentleman named Chuck Leaf, who some of you may know. Chuck eventually became the president of Naropa University. But anyway, Chuck was on the board of the Ben and Jerry's Foundation and on the board of Bernie Glassman's Grayston Foundation. And I was searching for a spiritual path, and I had tried Zen out, but it was a little too uptight, a little too mean, it felt to
Japanese.
me. It wasn't warm, and I grew up in an Italian Brooklyn neighborhood. I needed warmth, and and I didn't find it in my first encounter with Zen. But then Chuck said to me, "You gotta hear about this guy, a Jewish guy from Brighton Beach, who's taking Zen and turning it into a bakery that hires the unemployable. They don't hire people to make brownies; they make brownies in order to hire people." And I thought, "Oh, that's my path." It just clicked into focus. And so I did a deep dive into Zen, tried to learn about Bernie's work. Bernie didn't have a center at that point, and I still needed to work anyway, still had kids at home. So I wound up taking a job at the Santa Fe Community Foundation, a CEO job over there, which I took because I heard about Upaya Zen Center, which was started by Joan Halifax Roshi, who was one of Bernie's successors. And I thought, oh, there's a place for me to practice. So I made the shift. I started practice. I came to Zen, very formal Zen practice, and very late, only in 2009. But I dove in, kind of full body plunge, and lived at the Zen Center. I eventually left conventional work. I became the president, vice abbot, and chaplaincy director at Upaya Zen Center and did my training there. And then in 2017, when I went through what we call Dharma transmission, became authorized as a teacher, I then started Bread Loaf Mountain Zen community. So that's kind of the arc.
It's interesting when you talked about how scary it is to know that you can sound incredibly convincing speaking about profound things like the Dharma, but actually not really understand them and might really not quite get it. And I used to call that karaoke Dharma. And I
Karaoke.
refused to teach for a couple of years until I felt that I wasn't doing karaoke Dharma because I
Yeah,
couldn't stand it. It's like I can be very convincing, but oh my God, do
yeah,
I really know what it means?
yeah.
So I highly respect that sentiment. So here we are in Bread Loaf Mountain. First of all, why don't you describe it to us? Show us your world. As I
Yeah.
mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, and the podcast will actually not become visual, but what we can do is as you show us your place, you can describe it
Yeah.
so that the people who only won't have image and actually get to hear it get to see it. So Joshin is going to take us through the place that he has created along with the other people that work with him. However, I do want you to realize that like many of the things that Joshin has described already, he's kind of like your friend Dyken, the friend
Oh,
that,
yeah.
yeah, you guys are hub people.
Yeah, that's
Um,
interesting.
you're very hub-like. You manage to have everything, you connect with the people with the money, with the people with the needs, with the people with the vocation. And then you kind of keep all these kind of concentric circles of care happening.
Yeah, interesting. And Daikin and I share a very poignant moment actually together, where the day after the day Bernie Glassman died, I went down to his home and we washed Bernie's body and dressed him together.
Well, I
And
tell
that's
you,
a kind of
Boyne, Boyne is proud of you.
that's a heart bond there, boy. I tell you, it's a
Yeah,
very, very touching moment. And I have deep respect for Daikin's work. Yeah.
amazing guy. Okay,
Yeah.
show us
So,
your world
so
here.
maybe let me explain that the vision I always had was to fully integrate all these things that we often hold separate, like the meditation hall and meditation happens in one part of our lives, and then we go to another part of our lives and we do quote unquote service to others, and there's giving over there, and there's work over there, and there's family over there, and we live these kind of often disconnected parts of our lives. And in particular, in Zen, it always bothered me a bit, actually, that we think that practice is the time only on the cushion. And the Zen teachings are really clear about this. Practice is your life. Practice is all of life. It's all of life. So I thought, well, maybe we can manifest all of life right here. So our campus, we have a campus that has at the center of it, I'll take you into it. In the center of it is a meditation hall that looks fairly traditional. And in fact, on our altar, all our temple equipment, in fact, came from Bernie Glassman's temple. His wife, Eve, gave it to us to hold and steward after he died.
And for our listeners, the walls are very white. The place is impeccably clean. There's a lot of wood, and it's very elegantly and simply arranged.
Yeah, so very Zen in that way. There's an aesthetic. We think beauty is an important part of a dignifying quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so here on our altar, we have our Buddhas facing each other because we draw on the second chapter of the Lotus Sutra, actually, a Buddha and a Buddha. Buddha bows to Buddha, that Buddha is only manifesting as Buddha when Buddha is in relationship with other Buddhas. So this is the heart of community Zen for us. And so that sits on our altar. I wrote an article about this in Lion's Roar, if you ever want to look it up, about the day that we made this shift, which is a moment where I was just crushed by yet another war breaking out somewhere in the world. And I thought, if our practice doesn't teach us how to look each other in the eye and face each other, then we're screwed. Like that's what practice has to teach us. How do we look at each other and be in each other's company? And so that's when we changed the Buddhas in this direction. So this is our
Thank you.
our meditation hall, very simple. But where I was, just right through this tiny threshold, is our drop-in center called Gather. And here we practice, our practice is to open the door and to welcome everyone under every and any condition of life. So people come in all day long. Some go to Middlebury College. Some are elderly people. Many are living outside or homeless underneath the bridge or in the woods in the area. Many live in mental health housing in town. What maybe everyone has in common is they really want to reconnect with other people. They've felt alienated, they've felt lonely, they've felt left out, and we're just creating a welcoming space for the spiritual practice of hanging out. We think of that as a spiritual practice, like just hanging out with each other. And it feels to me like we can't make any progress toward putting our fractured world back together until we really want to be with each other. And how do we learn to be with each other? By being with each other. And you get interested in each other and you become invested in each other's well-being. And so that's what we're doing at Gather. So people come in, they don't have to be sober, they don't have to be clean. We have showers, laundry, always lots and lots of food, and a very big table. People always gather around the table. We think of this coffee area as the second altar of Bread Loaf Mountain. And we treat the coffee maker just like we treat the incense box on the altar, which is we hold it with two hands. We see it as a dignifying part of our practice together. It brings us together. And then there's a little warming kitchen in this part. This gets a lot of use every day. And then a lovely room over here that is recovery meetings or people who want some just want to talk quietly because something's happened in their life or they want to come and be alone and read a book. This is all available to them as well. And so then, so mentioned to you that the meditation hall is right in the center, and that's by design. And so on the other side of the meditation hall is this long corridor, and this has, you'll see there's our Han, the old Zen block of wood we use to call people to meditation. But down this hallway are bedrooms, laundry, and a crafts room. And then right next door, we also bought the property right on the other side of those windows right there. And that is an apartment complex with 4 units in it that can house, some of them are 2-bedroom units. And there we provide supported transitional housing to people coming out of prison, people coming out of homelessness, and people coming out of domestic violence situations. So right now we have a guy living upstairs who spent 7 years inside. He's transitioning back into the community, and he's learning kind of how to do that after being inside for a long time. We have a woman and a 1-year-old baby who got out of an unsafe situation and domestic violence living there. And we have a woman who's now been stably housed for a couple years after a long period of homelessness. And we try to integrate all of this. Like, this is all of life. This is Zen. We don't privilege one part of this over any other part. It is all kind of equal, and we try to put it all in kind of one vibe, you know? And the vibe is kind of, we bring our caring attention to all of it. That's what we're trying to do.
Who's your staff, if there is such a thing, or your volunteers, or your fellow Zen practitioners?
Yeah.
I mean, who
So
helps you? Who cooks?
we're not staffed. So we have no paid staff. I mean, I do get a small living stipend as the guiding teacher, but I do the fundraising. I do the kind of property management. I work with one of my students who's local to coordinate, gather volunteers. We don't call them volunteers, actually. We call them friends. Everybody
Mhm.
here is a friend. And then we have residents. We have one long-term resident, but we have other residents who come for periods of time, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years. And depending on their skill set, they take on different responsibilities and tasks for periods of time. And then our local Sangha are timekeepers. We have meditation 7 days a week. Many homeless people come to meditation here, actually, first thing in the morning. That and a good cup of coffee and get to use the bathroom. And yeah, so we have people who have lived outside who offer to come and cook, who do help us with cleaning sometimes. One guy who we met, we had an encampment in our backyard last summer, and a couple of the people from the encampment, it all fell apart. It was a very interesting process. I can tell that story at some point because we brought council process to the encampment.
Mm.
But we had an encampment in our backyard, and one of the guys who lived in the encampment still lives outside. He comes to Sesshin with us. He's come on 2 street retreats with me, and he comes to meditation every single day.
Wow.
Yeah, comes to our
So you
Dharma
have almost
talks.
like a boundary-less community where the practice is encouraged within what people can, and nobody is almost, though there is a process that leads towards sanity, there is no hierarchy.
Yeah, well, you have to have some hierarchy. Like, I have to
Yeah,
decide like how much money we need,
of
and
course, of course, of course.
you
Yeah.
know
I
those
mean
kinds of
more
things.
like you're not wearing a white coat and you're like doctor, you know what I
No, no,
mean?
no. So
Yeah,
that's really important. We never
separate.
treat people as a client. We don't ask people their diagnoses. We accept people completely as they are,
Wow.
however they identify themselves. We never probe into um, what kind of, how they've been labeled. We do not
Hmm.
care how
Hmm.
they've been labeled by others. And that took some time for people to trust. Like, don't you need to know that I qualify for food stamps or I qualify for, HUD housing? But like, that doesn't matter. You're welcomed here
Hmm.
regardless. And
Yeah.
people have relaxed as they come to realize that because they're not seen as their diagnosis. We don't force that identity onto them. They can be free.
Yeah. Two things occur to me that when I teach meditation instruction, the number one instruction for the new instructors is when somebody walks into the room, it's the first time in their life where they're not judged.
Yeah, that's
If you
exactly
do that, they will understand meditation. And the second one is when I was in college, I did a residency at a state hospital where my graduate project was to think about the way that the staff labeled everybody, and it became kind of a mediated relationship through the diagnosis.
right.
And we were actually looking at the staff themselves
Mm,
and the way that you can use the system to create distance.
yeah,
It was overwhelmingly interesting. The sad part, yes, I was very much supporting the transition of people who did not have to be sheltered and warehoused, but we didn't provide them a place to be. Like in New York these days, the homeless situation. And you realize these folks should be somewhere where they're cared for,
yeah,
and that fortunately there are places such as yours where they can be cared for without being boxed, which
yeah.
kills you anyhow.
Do you know what I think? This is interesting. You said that kind of distancing thing. So that's one of the dynamics we play with here. So we try to reduce as much as possible the difference between somebody who comes here to volunteer and somebody who comes here um, as a
Hmm.
guest. And the reason for that is, listen, I'm a big fan of volunteers and helpers and people doing things. But as a Zen practice, um, we're trying to minimize and ultimately eliminate those things that distinguish us from one another so that we can reflect into each other and know and understand the oneness of life, the interconnected nature of our lives. And so there's something about helping culture. This is where we talked about dangerous intimacy, right? So many of us will love to go volunteer in places, and we do it one day a week or one day a month, and we've done good charitable work. And that's great. I don't want to dissuade anybody from doing that. But I think as Zen practitioners, there's like another step. Like if we think of that as concentric circle toward full um, boundless inclusion or something like that,
Hmm.
that we can even let go of the helper and helped dualism
Hmm.
and begin to explore what it's like to let go of our helper identities. That's a big gather is not really a service for homeless people. In many ways, it's a service to those of us who have gotten very used to having positions of privilege and power in society, where we've wrapped our identity about being one of the good guys who's out to change the world and help the world. It's like, great. And who are you beyond helper? Who are you when you're really just one with the person right across from you, where you're a Buddha and a Buddha? Nothing more, nothing less than that. So sometimes this mindset we have is that, I'm so privileged, I have so much, I'm highly educated, I'm middle class, I have money, I have skills, I should go help somebody. Great. And sometimes that becomes a barrier, and it's a way we maintain safety and that little bit of distance from each other so that we can feel kind of safe in our identity. And I think these practices bring us into the danger of intimacy. You know, it should feel like something is at risk. What is that thing that is at risk when we let go of those identities? You know, and that's ego there, right? That's the edge that we're trying to explore, letting go of. And it's scary for people. It's really scary. Shouldn't there be more of a boundary here? You know, just an example is how often do we, as nice, good people doing good things in the world, sit down and listen to someone who's really suffering, and we get to ask them all the questions about their life? Oh, how did that happen to you? Oh, you know, that must be very, very sad. Oh, I'm really sorry that happened. You know, where we never put any of our own vulnerability on the table. We put our
Mhm.
pity, we put our sympathy, but very little of ourselves gets in there. And part of what Gather is experimenting with as a Zen practice, we're not a social service organization, but as a Zen practice, is how we become more and more embedded in each other's lives. So it's important for us that this isn't a one off
Mhm.
experience, that we're open multiple days a week. We come back over, just like Zen training. Every day you come back and you do the same thing again and again and again, 10,000 times. Because in that process, you're letting go of something. And that's what the Gather practice is. It's really very much like temple training in a Zen monastery. Yeah.
Mhm. And tell me something, how all of a sudden you're on the streets doing your street retreats.
Hmm.
How many have you done? Where? Who comes to be with you?
Yeah.
Are different places different? Is it different to do it in Memphis than it is to do it in
Yeah.
San Francisco?
Yeah.
What's it like?
Yeah. Good. And by the way, this whole project is born out of my street retreat practice. So, you know, the three tenets of a Zen peacemaker are not knowing,
Mhm.
bearing witness, and then naturally emerging action out of not knowing and bearing witness. And so this is what emerged out of street bearing witness to life on the streets. So that said, I've done maybe 35 or 40 street retreats all over the country. I was in New York last month, Manhattan. I'll be in San Francisco in December for Rahatsu. I do the Rahatsu session out on the streets. Rahatsu is the Mahayanas, many of the Mahayana schools celebrate the Buddha's awakening the first week
Mm,
of December. In Zen tradition, we do 8 days of silent retreat, session. I take people out on the streets for those 8 days. So
mhm.
we are in practice for 8 solid days, living on the sidewalks.
Do you have sleeping bags, boxes? Do you have anything?
We look for cardboard, and we sleep in
Cardboard?
cardboard. Yeah, I sometimes bring a plastic tarp because the rain or something like that. But anyway, I've been New York, Boston, Rutland, Vermont, um, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Nashville, Tennessee, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, and I'll go anywhere actually.
Do people invite you or you decide to go
I just
somewhere?
decide to go, and
Okay.
then I invite people to come with me. And there's a structure, you know, Zen likes structures. So
Hmm.
there is a structure, there's a way the day begins and ends. But largely, we're practicing with the three seals with aimlessness, signlessness, and emptiness. We wander, we're just wandering without much identity, without being helpers, without being of
Individually or in
service.
group?
Always in group.
Always in group. About seven, eight,
The
two, three.
I've twice made the mistake of bringing 14. That's too many.
Yeah.
So New York last month was 14, um, and but I usually try to keep it to 8 maximum.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes, you're
so
not overwhelming as a group. Yeah.
A number of things. One is it's very hard to process the experience with that many people. Second is we're a big strain on soup kitchens where we go get food, and I don't want to strain, so we often wait to be the end of the line,
Mm-hmm.
and we can put a big strain on places. We never sleep in shelters. We always sleep outside because we don't want to take up beds. But we
So
go
it's
out and
men, women, old, young, white,
yes,
black, Hispanic, everybody.
queer, straight,
Great.
trans, you name it. Yep.
Okay.
And this is a practice that Bernie Glassman started. It's like a living koan practice in a way. You just drop in, and you're a little disoriented by it, because you have all these assumptions. You have all this knowing, you think you know what it's all about. For me, a lot of the process is when I go out there, the first day is always about my outrage at the systems that allow this to happen. This 40 street retreats in, I still have
Mhm.
to deal with those feelings. Like how could it be that we live in a city, in a country that has its first trillionaire, and this many people living in abject poverty on our streets in shit and in squalor? Like how do we allow that? So I confront a lot of, my values, my assumptions, my biases, who the bad guys are, who the good guys are, who the perpetrators, victims, bystanders. I'm doing all this stuff in my head. And it's really helpful to see all of that, and to ultimately recognize, the emptiness of it all, really. That doesn't mean your heart isn't broken. It still breaks. You still come to the end of that retreat, and you get to go home. Yeah,
Mhm.
and you leave people behind, and you have to grapple with the truth of that, and our
That
complicitness in it all.
I did a lot of Cuba work, and I am Cuban, right? And I would always remind my Canadian colleagues, because I'm a mostly Canadian, but also American academic, that the difference between them and the Cubans is that they could leave. The Cubans couldn't.
Yeah,
And they have to be so different, so careful because they don't understand the conditions in which people have to remain. And maybe they had a great time drinking rum and dancing, but they're staying and
right,
they're not drinking rum and dancing all day.
right.
And it's that kind of communing and understanding the pain of being almost trapped in a situation for which you probably not necessarily created.
Yeah. And in some vast way, through all our ancient twisted karma, we are also responsible for all of it, right? We can't deny that either. This
Hmm.
is not someone else's problem. It's not someone else's suffering. It's ours. And it's our collective opportunity to awaken.
Hmm.
And I really believe that. And and that's what I'm trying to open up in myself when I'm out on the streets.
And it's interesting because you do bring it, and then you bring it home by living in it. It's almost like, well, I don't stay in it, but they can come with me.
Yeah. Well, there's always this kind of thing. I often describe the end of street retreat as for many people, it's like the toothpaste comes out of the tube, like you can never put it back in. Once you plunge into that setting, into those conditions, and you're bearing witness, opening yourself, grokking, becoming one with that situation as best we can, you will never see the streets in the same way again. You it's very hard after that to actually just walk by somebody who's begging and not notice them like we used to before.
Mhm.
And you feel the tug and the sorrow of that. And that begins to cultivate kind of the awakening spirit in us, you know? Like, I want a better world for everyone,
Mhm.
including those folks.
Every time I'm living in Chicago now, and every time I see a Latin American woman. Mostly they tend to be old. They look old and maybe they're only 30 something. And they have three children and they're selling chiclets on the street. The way I look at them is it could be me. It could be my mother, you know? And I've made it into a practice of, well, I'll cross the street. Today I stopped in the bank so I could have some money. And I come and I give them money and I say hello to the kids and I check their hands and I give them $1. And it's like, my God, that could be me. Could be my mother.
Yeah, I'm kind of channeling Bernie right now, who might
Like,
say, who
oh,
might say, guess what? It
they
is
are.
you,
It
and
is
it
me.
is your mother, and
It
it
is
is
my
your
mother.
child.
Yes.
And we say it in the Metta Sutta, just as a mother keeps her only child from harm, so will I. It's like, yeah, and this is in the Christian scriptures. It's the Beatitudes. It's in the great world religions. This is the theme of all of it. You
Hmm.
are it, and it is you. Um,
And this kind of brings me to a topic you were talking about when I said to you, I'm coming to Vermont. I'd love to come see you. And you say, come on Saturday. I
yeah,
said, what do you do Saturday? Why don't you tell us what you do Saturday?
yeah. Saturday is really fun because it's again, I think, another like expression of Zen. Um, So we open the doors like we do every day, but Saturday is known as Music Day. A community jam session is what it is. Um, and so people come with all kinds of instruments, fiddles, recorders, guitars, bass, ukuleles, you name it. It shows up, and their voices. And we just start singing songs for hours. And every division disappears. Rich and poor, well and unwell, sober and in recovery, or sober and actively using, like you name it, all those distinctions disappear. And all we're doing is engaging in action together. And it's beautiful. It's creating something beautiful. People love it. They feel like they have the capacity to create a world like this because they are creating a world like this. It's
Yes,
a
yes.
very embodied experience for them, for all of us, and it's great. And at the end of every week, we also do a quick impromptu memorial service where we ask everybody, who are you grieving? Who have you lost? Who died? And people will share names of people who overdosed, or a great musician that they admired died, or they heard about some war in some part of the world and they're grieving the children that were killed in a school that was bombed in Iran. The whole world comes together. And then we sing, may the circle be unbroken.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, there's not a dry eye in the house. I mean, people feel the connection to the world in those moments. And I think that's Zen. I think that's the heart of what Zen is about.
It's redemption through community,
Absolutely.
redemption through love, redemption through belonging. And that will be very much what all of us have to learn to do in the coming years.
Yeah.
How are we going to provide each other a moment of redemption together?
I also think it's a place where people touch their awakened nature, just to use Buddhist language about it. It's like,
Hmm.
this is enlightenment. This is what Dogen calls practice enlightenment. It's in the doing of it that we understand our enlightenment. It's not some abstract, theoretical, out there, mystical fireworks kind of thing. No, it's in the actual fulfillment of the interconnected nature of our ever changing lives. Like to recognize that's what it is and that's what we're in together. And, I think that's just an embodied experience of the awakened mind. I love that. There's a famous philosopher named Peter Hershock. I don't know if you ever read his
Mm-mm.
book. It's a very, very heady book, like way above my pay grade. But in it, it's a book called Liberating Intimacy. It's like we use this word intimacy in Zen. What is it? How do we free the natural intimacy that we've separated ourselves from? He uses jazz as the example.
Mm,
Free jazz, which is a bunch of players who start just listening to one another. That's all
mm,
they're doing. And then their music starts to bounce off against one another. And then before you know it, 30, 40 minutes into it, they're vibing, man. They are in it. They're in the groove. And everybody is their own sound. Everybody's improvising. Everybody's using their own skills. Everybody has their own timbre and style, but they're vibing. That's the experience right there. And so that's kind of what we're recreating here in the mornings, right? It's just like, okay, let's all get together and sing. And this is our awakened life, you know? And what
well,
happens? What happens over time, though? Let me just say this because we've been doing Gather now for 4 years, very consistently. What happens is people begin to experience that the community has their back. That's what changes for them. People who felt like nobody in this community cares about me. They don't care if I'm dead or alive. They don't care if they never see me again. They start to feel like I would be missed, you know, like the community will catch me if I fall. And we notice that happening as the years go on.
the only thing I can say once again is that I'm happy that you're the last one in the series because it's about the inescapability of our collective
Mm,
and what we can do to make it joyous for everyone by diving into the pain of the others,
mm,
which is a very strange way to make it happen, but that is the Dharma.
that is it.
That
Yeah.
is it.
I think the
So,
Buddha said something like that, actually, right?
Kitty, I, I'm sorry. I'll put a copy. I'll put a footnote. I promise. Put a. So let's open it up to
Great.
questions and comments from our small audience here. There will be an audience online as a podcast,
Yeah.
but we have our friends here. Anybody have anything to contribute, to add, to question? I don't know, Jeff, but it looks like he's wearing a Zen robe, or is he wearing a particularly interest house robe?
Jeff, we're in a Samway from Vermont.
Uh-huh.
From beautiful down here in Marlborough, Vermont. Thanks for making time for this great talk tonight. Um, and part of the Vipassana community down here as well. I came this evening um, to bridge the gap that I feel exists right now between so many communities of faith and the startling, trillionaire-rific world in which we currently live, where we can have, 40% of the population not having enough money for one ER visit and a guy who can buy Mars tomorrow. And how we allow that to exist, I think, is our responsibility. Not the fact that it does, but how we allow it to. I came tonight because I wanted to. We've started a small group down here called Buddhists for Peace. It's not a very clever name, but it's the banner we march with, a very plain banner we march with, and all the rallies down here and trying to create a more just and equitable world.
Mm.
I came here for inspiration tonight, and I'll just say I got it. So the kinds of things that you're doing up in Middlebury, I may pay you a visit. I'll wear better clothes, I promise. But
Let's go on a Saturday.
it's the Vipassana community. We wear sweats, people. I'm sorry, it's what we do.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm wearing.
But I mean, there is so much to do. And Brattleboro, as you probably know, is a town with tons of its own concerns right now. For those of you who don't live in Vermont, we're one of the places that we have a great deal of issues with housing insecurity, food insecurity. I mean, one out of every 4 Vermonters uses a food bank at least once a year. That's Vermont, and Brattleboro just kind of concentrates that because we do have an attempt at a compassionate community, which brings, I think, some of the issues into more stark relief, and hopefully makes it harder to just walk past them and ignore them. But I'm not sure that it does.
Mm.
I'm sure it does. So anyway, I just want to say thanks for making the time. It's remarkably inspiring to hear the work you're doing, and I'll I might call you up and say,
Yeah,
how to make that
please
happen
do.
down here as well.
Please do. You mentioned this word bridging. I want to kind of address that a little bit because I think we're trying to do a couple things too. One is I offered for 2 cycles, a 2-year long kind of exploration of our relationship to money, where we looked at our personal relationship to money, our communal, like as a community locally, our relationship to money and resources, and then structurally and systemically in economic systems. What do we participate in? And over the 2 years, people do a number of exercises like live on a food stamp budget and give money away freely without any strings attached. And it's a whole bunch of things that we do. And part of that is because I'm very concerned about the economic divide. That's really the focus of my kind of teaching is just the wild economic disparities that we see and everything that ripples out from that. And I think part of it is we have to come to terms with this part of our lives we rarely talk publicly about. How much money do you have? And where is it? And what do you do with it? It's such a private part. It's like more private than our sex lives. And, we don't talk about it. And, and there, unless you have a lot of it and then you brag about it. but, but if you're very poor, you're kind of ashamed of it. It's just a whole thing. And it's been really interesting to be going through that process with Dharma practitioners about how difficult it is to actually talk about our money histories, our lifelong relationship to money, the way it's shaped, the way we see the world, think of the world, the way we divide up the world in our own mind, who we align ourselves with and who we set ourselves against. It's a really interesting exploration. The second thing, bridging, I would say, is, Zen in America is still very, very new as far as Buddhism goes. But I've been concerned about that, I'll call it the Buddhist the Dharma industrial complex, that we have bought into the economics of our place and even the bad economics, the harmful economics of our place. How often we're selling books and becoming famous and building huge retreat centers that charge $800 or $1,000 for a few days to get away from it all. The kind of co-option of the self-help industry, all the self-soothing that's done through these centers, and it's become, an enclave of liberal, elite, high net worth individuals. And
Yep.
okay, it's part of an evolution. What I am hoping for is that there are many more experiments going on, that we take some risk to really try other models than the retreat center model, and we maybe fail brilliantly at them. So we don't do retreats here. We don't charge any money for anything that we do. We don't know that we'll survive. It may not survive. That is kind of irrelevant to me. What I'm interested in is can we just try something a little different? Can we elevate some other part of the narrative about who we think we are? And what are we doing when we get together? And so we named the No Barriers Temple the No Barriers Temple for a reason, because we really want to start reducing all these kind of invisible barriers that Dharma in the West has put in place. And I think this is a major thing for Western convert Buddhists to really be thinking about in a very deep way. And it's about race and it's about gender and stuff, but it's also about money and economics. And that part of the conversation, I think, doesn't get elevated often enough in our discussions about what we're doing as Dharma practitioners in the West.
I appreciate you saying that. And I'm really grateful for the conversation on money as well, because I do think about that kind of elite core that has some money stashed away somewhere and still is going to bow every morning. And it's okay to have that and to alleviate that suffering. But where's that money sitting and with whom is it sitting and what are they doing with that? Are they funding a war in Iran? Are they funding data centers that are taking away energy and water from communities?
Yeah.
Are they bringing it back in the community? And that's something else I think that is part of the they used to say that every $100 bill had at least some trace of cocaine on it.
Yeah.
There's at least some trace of shadow of
Course.
war and the continuation of hierarchy right now on every dollar bill out there.
Yeah, well, one of the things, so I worked in philanthropy for a long time, and one of the systems analysis pieces I have and critique I have of the philanthropic industrial complex is hidden behind the virtue of philanthropy. If you look, the vast majority of philanthropic capital in the United States, which is hundreds of billions a year, goes onto Wall Street in endowments.
Yeah.
So, really. And so, have we ever thought about where all that invested money is in the world and what's it doing in the world? So, when I was the CEO of the Vermont Community Foundation, I asked that question. I said, okay, back then we were small. We had like $70 million. I was like, where is that $70 million? They said, oh, it's in large cap, small cap. It's invested in this, invested in that. I said, but where? And we did the analysis. And guess what? Our top like 3 or 4 equity holdings were chopping the tops off mountains in Appalachia, was slave-based labor diamond mining in Botswana, and oil, Royal Dutch Shell in Darfur during a famine. And those 3 holdings were larger than our total grants budget for the year. So you tell me what philanthropy is doing in the world, you know? And where is that analysis? We hide behind these virtues, Oh, it's charitable giving. But when an organization has $1 billion endowment, that money is doing something in the world. It's active money, and it's often doing an enormous amount of harm. So I think we as Buddhists also have a place in that conversation. I mean, look who's practicing Buddhism in the United States. It's very high net worth individuals, often, not always, but often, who have a lot of influence and power and are trying to live ethically mindful lives. And I think what's happening with our money should be part of that. Sorry, I don't mean to get on my like high
No,
horse
no,
about
no.
it.
No,
I
When I
this
start.
is great. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate the feedback. I'll give the floor to other folks, but I'm going to come visit you. This is too important.
This is the next wave, and I do hope I'm going to Vermont myself soon, and in September sometime. And I do hope that we have an opportunity to engage in the conversations of the Tibetans talk about prajna, which is clarity, of being able to understand the environmental, social, economic construct that we take as given because it's falling apart. And what's fantastic about something falling apart is that it gives you an opportunity first to see what was there. People immediately want something else, but they haven't examined what's there.
Mm,
For myself, I do think that understanding economics and class,
yeah.
the fact that the current lower classes who are being left out are voting against their own economic interests. It really tells you how confused the situation is and how it's true. The Dharma has become that which you must be able to afford. And it's becoming prohibitive, even for a middle class professional such as myself. So I can't imagine what's going to happen as the situation gets worse and worse and worse for those who don't have assets. If you have liquid assets, if you have real estate or if you have investments, you'll be fine. If you don't, you're out. So let's get radical. Let's have radical compassion. What is it? Dangerous intimacy. Ooh, I'm so excited. I can't wait. Let's do, let's get risque. Let's talk to each other. Let's not do anything. Let's talk to each other. Let's see how we can inspire each other
Mm,
and take the conversation further. I do think that Buddha Dharma provides a logic that is so antithetical to capitalism as the best that ego can do, that it is our responsibility to begin to talk about a different way, and not because we think we're better, but because we are like everybody else. And if it's not you, it's me, and we're both. So thank you. I'm very excited and very happy. And if indeed we do a season 2, I hope it's radical, and I hope it's intimate, and I hope we can take all these discussions further. And maybe the format will be different. Maybe we'll have salons. Who knows? That being said, Joshin, I cannot thank you enough. And I know that this is not possible, but like I laughed with Daikin, can't you just franchise what you do so that more people do it? Can't you just like, let's make more burgers? We have to. What you're doing is so useful, not just for other people, but you make me proud of Zen. If Zen is what you described, I hope I can never be good enough person to be a Zen practitioner. It's
A little
great.
over the top, but
No, it
thank you.
isn't. I am, because no, you actually do it. I do a lot of talking. That's what I do. That's
All
my
right, my
job.
friend.
I'm a talking head. You actually get there. But I have to have a talking head, or other people are not going to hear about you. So, hey.
Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
My friends, thank you. Yeah, and yeah, if I came off as too strong, my apologies.
Oh, I love it. It was passionate, it was decent, it was direct, and it was dangerous, and it was intimate, and it was radical, and it was loving
All right,
and full of joy. And if I come see you, I'll bring a guitar.
great.
And thank you to everyone. Thank you, Candia, for your magnificent work on Series 1. And yay! And thanks to Seth Segal from the Buddhist Coalition for Democracy for facilitating all the internal processes of putting the series together. Thanks for Kate, who's today here, and it's been very useful. Leslie Ehrman, who's actually been working on the podcast, and I think Leslie too, on making these things well known in social media. That being said, I hope that this lifetime and others, we can continue being friends. Okay?
Maybe
Like,
so.
okay?
Yeah.
Muchas gracias. Thank you all.
No, thank you, Julie.
Hasta pronto.